I'm extremely grateful to Lord Goldsmith, both for the meticulousness of these reports and for the unfussy, intelligible and lucid way in which he set out the recommendations. I've really nothing to add on that level of detail, so I'd like to take a step back and ponder why it is that these alliances among the English-speaking democracies are the basis of our security. I'd like to take your lordships back to the 9th of August 1941, a date which one or two members of our chamber will no doubt remember as if it were yesterday. This was the day in which President Roosevelt made the longest walk of his presidency, in a way that is now, I think, almost unimaginable. The US media contrived to hide the fact of the president's polio from the electorate, so he was always pictured standing unaided or seated. But on that day, walking from the decks of USS Augusta to those of HMS Prince of Wales, he decided to walk. And so, supported by his son on one hand and by a naval officer on the other, he made the slow progress to meet the British Prime Minister while the band of HMS Prince of Wales struck up the Stars and Stripes forever. And what followed was the most extraordinary demonstration of what binds the Anglophone democracies together. It happened to be a Sunday, and so the crews of the two vessels were mustered for a joint religious service. Churchill had chosen every detail personally and meticulously, down to the hymns, down to the reading that the chaplain gave from the pulpit. It came from Joshua 2. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage. And afterwards, exultantly, Churchill burst out the same language, the same hymns, the same ideals. And when he said the same ideals, he wasn't making a general point about being the good guys. Think of the world as it stood in August 1941. The entire Eurasian landmass, from Lisbon to Vladivostok, was under one form or another of autocratic rule. Liberty was thrown back to the alliance of English-speaking peoples. We talk of universal values, but actually, almost everything we mean when we say that was a precept overwhelmingly developed in the language which I'm now speaking. The things that make the modern world rational and comfortable and pleasant: regular elections and uncensored newspapers, equality between men and women, the ability of different parties to contest without people being exiled or shot, habeas corpus, jury trials, these things were overwhelmingly the heritage of the English-speaking peoples. Imagine that the Second World War had ended differently. Imagine that the Cold War had ended differently. There had been nothing universal about them then. We tend to be polite, and so we gloss over the extent to which these values became universal as a series of military actions by this country and its kindred allies. I spent 21 years in the European Parliament, and I was often teased by continental colleagues about this country's supposed subordination to the United States. They would mock us. Oh, do you have any foreign policy of your own? Do you always just have to wait for a phone call from DC? You've become a sort of aircraft carrier for the US. And as patiently and politely as I could, I would explain that perhaps, formed by the same history and by the same institutions, when presented by the same problem, we tended to respond in similar ways. We had a shared indignation at injustice, we had a shared belief in freedom and in the elevation of the individual over the collective. My lords, we've lived through, all of us, a period of, if you like, Anglosphere hegemony, where these values have been treated as universal because they've rested on victory in the Second World War and then in the Cold War. But permanence is the illusion of every age. There are rival models out there. And in fact, thinking back to the debate we just had in the chamber, a lot of these rival systems have come together from no other motive than a shared hostility to us. It's very difficult to see what the religious fundamentalists of Tehran, the hermit kingdom of North Korea, the imperial and nationalist autocracy of Russia, and the still notionally communist state of China have in common beyond a hostility to Western individual and property rights and free contract and all the things that go with it. And the idea that we have an automatic advantage, that other countries will, if you like, feel their way towards our values as they become richer and more educated, I think history rather disproves that idea. The Chinese model in particular strikes me as a civilizational or categorical alternative to ours, because unlike the others, it is capable of export. There are plenty of countries out there that don't much like us, but the peculiar way in which, through a combination of high technology of facial recognition and surveillance, and the use of notionally private companies like Weibo and Tencent and Alibaba to act both as proselytizers for and spies for the regime, it seems to me that Beijing has built a model that it could sell, that it could say to, I don't know, Maduro in Venezuela, if you don't want to worry about any more elections, here is a way that we can build you your panopticon state, and then we won't need to worry about having to deal with any of your successors. And that fundamentally is what's caused our renewed interest in the Pacific. And that's what triggered the AUKUS agreement. It was about maintaining a free world based on the rule of law and the rule among nations and open sea lanes against revanchist states that challenge the established order. So I hope we'll be able to build on and to strengthen the AUKUS alliance. In particular, I look forward to its expansion. I'm very encouraged by conversations I've had with the opposition in Canada. They particularly are keen to become involved if there is a change of government, which, apart from anything else, I think would make it much more euphonic. Caucus works a lot better, doesn't it, than AUKUS, which is always quite difficult to say. But I feel that our interest in the Pacific region, quite apart from being in tune with our past, is reflective of the absolutely critical economic importance of that region. I think that just as at some point in the 18th century, the centre of the world shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, so in this century it has shifted to the Pacific. And we, tied as we are by habit and history, by kinship and custom, by language and law to so many of the nations in that region, don't have the option of remaining neutral. Let's just remember what it is we're defending. Beijing has a tendency to divide and rule. We've not really been on the receiving end of very much direct aggression. Australia has. Complete trade embargo and immense diplomatic pressure after they called for an inquiry into the origins of COVID. I don't think we could possibly be indifferent as between an allied English-speaking democracy and an autocratic state. And as long as we still have a song to sing, as long as we still have more to give, I hope we'll remain involved in that region. Nothing lasts forever. The day will surely come when all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nineveh and Tyre. So I'll tell you what, my lords, when that day comes, I think we're going to miss this era through which we've passed more than we currently imagine possible.